History loves a dramatic ending. We point to madness, addiction, ego, or arrogance to explain why so many extraordinary figures collapsed under the weight of their own legend. But what if, behind the chaos, the scandals, the violent mood swings, there was something else? Something more silent, more pervasive, and far more cruel. For centuries before the discovery of penicillin, syphilis carved its way through every class of society, from gangsters to geniuses, actors to aristocrats. It was the great masquerader, mimicking mental illness, dementia, psychosis, even simple personality changes. It eroded the brain slowly, turning charisma into confusion, discipline into obsession, brilliance into a flicker. Today, armed with modern neurology and hindsight, historians and medical researchers have begun to re-examine the lives of several towering figures, people we long believed destroyed by vice, excess, or self-inflicted ruin. But the clues in their behavior, symptoms, medical notes, and late-life deterioration point to something far more consistent. This is the story of 6 icons whose tragic downfalls may have been shaped not by weakness, but by a disease no one dared to name. 1. Al Capone, the criminal empire built on a crumbling mind. Few men defined the American criminal underworld like Al Capone. Sharp-minded, strategic, and ruthlessly organized, Capone built an empire that outsmarted law enforcement for years. But what brought him down wasn't bullets, betrayal, or prohibition's end. It was an illness he had carried since he was a teenager. Capone contracted syphilis young, and like many men of his era, refused treatment in order to hide the stigma. For years, the infection smoldered in his body. While his enemies assumed he was invincible, his nervous system was quietly unraveling. By the time he entered Alcatraz, the transformation had begun. Guards noted wild mood swings, paranoia, confusion. Capone would suddenly forget instructions, lash out, or fall into vacant stares. Doctors eventually diagnosed neurosyphilis, the final stage, when the bacteria penetrates the brain. This condition erodes memory, judgment, and personality, turning even the sharpest strategist into a fragmented version of himself. When Capone was released, he was only 47, but mentally, he was said to have the cognition of a child. He wandered his Florida estate, talking to imaginary visitors, unaware of the years he had lost. The once formidable kingpin died not from violence, but from the consequences of an illness that could have been cured if treatment had been available, or if stigma hadn't kept him silent. Capone's downfall wasn't the story we thought. It was it was a medical tragedy wearing the mask of criminal justice. 2. Howard Hughes, from aviation prodigy to prisoner of his own mind. Few figures embody American innovation like Howard Hughes, aviator, filmmaker, billionaire, and obsessive visionary. For decades, people blamed his bizarre late-life behavior on eccentricity, drug use, or simple madness. But modern researchers have uncovered evidence suggesting his unraveling may have had a deeper cause. In his youth and early adulthood, Hughes was charismatic, driven, brilliant, but gradually cracks appeared. He became reclusive, rigid, paranoid. He repeated sentences fixated on germs and performed rituals that dominated his days. His physical health deteriorated. Weight loss, tremors, chronic pain, and eventually near total withdrawal from society. While various theories attempt to explain Hughes's decline, traumatic brain injuries, obsessive-compulsive disorder, severe addiction, some medical historians point to another possibility hidden in his symptoms: tertiary syphilis or neurosyphilis. Syphilis was rampant in Hollywood's early decades, and untreated infections were tragically common among men of Hughes's generation. His symptoms, progressive cognitive impairment, personality shifts, neuropathy, and extreme paranoia, overlap strikingly with known neurosyphilis cases before penicillin. We will never know for certain. His medical records remain sealed, and Hughes was obsessively private. But even the possibility reframes his story. Perhaps the man we labeled crazy was actually fighting an invisible, untreated disease, alone in a penthouse, with no one living close enough to see what was happening. 3. John Barrymore, the shattered genius of the stage. John Barrymore wasn't just a movie star. He was one of America's greatest stage actors, the man who redefined Hamlet for a generation. Handsome, magnetic, wickedly talented, Barrymore rose to fame with a brilliance that seemed effortless. But behind the charm and wit, something was breaking down. Throughout his later years, Barrymore's friends documented memory lapses, tremors, erratic anger disorientation, and episodes of depression so severe he could barely function. Hollywood chalked it up to alcoholism. And yes, he drank heavily, but alcohol alone couldn't explain the neurological deterioration or the speed of his decline. Biographers now believe a second factor may have been at play: long-term, untreated syphilis, a disease he was rumored to have contracted early in life. By the time he reached middle age, Barrymore showed signs consistent with general paresis, a form of neurosyphilis that mimics dementia and mania. One friend described seeing him forget entire conversations minutes after they occurred. Another recalled Barrymore searching for words he had known his entire life, tears in his eyes as his once formidable memory slipped through his fingers. His career collapsed, roles dried up, his body weakened. And at just 60 years old, one of the era's greatest actors was gone. Barrymore's fall wasn't simply the result of reckless living. That it may have been a treatable infection slowly erasing the man he had been. For Paul Muni, the man of 1,000 faces, hiding a single terrible secret. Paul Muni, known as the man of 1,000 faces, was one of Hollywood's most respected actors. He transformed himself so completely for each role that audiences barely recognized him from one film to the next. But the same dedication that made him a legend also concealed a private struggle that consumed him. During his later years, Muni experienced a series of neurological symptoms: tremors, memory failures, emotional instability, unpredictable rages, and sudden periods of confusion. Studios quietly distanced themselves, unsure how to handle a star whose behavior had begun to alarm directors and co-stars. At the time, his symptoms were attributed to ill health and the stress of his demanding roles. But modern medical historians have pointed out troubling similarities between Muni's decline and late-stage neurosyphilis. While no conclusive diagnosis exists, his medical privacy was fiercely protected. Many of the documented behaviors reflect what physicians of the era called dementia paralytica, a brain condition caused by untreated syphilis. The tragedy is that Muni was too young for such rapid neurological decline without an underlying cause. His brilliance lived in the details: his posture, his voice, his precise emotional control. And it was those very qualities he began losing first. In the end, the man who could become anyone seemed to lose himself most of all. 5. Oscar Wilde: wit, beauty, and the disease that shadowed him. Oscar Wilde dazzled the world with wit unlike anything seen before or since. His plays crackled with brilliance, his conversation was irresistible, and his charm seemed endless. But Wilde's final years read very differently: slowed speech, chronic pain, neurological symptoms, and a tragic loss of vitality. Historically, Wilde's decline has been blamed on depression after imprisonment, poverty, alcoholism, or simply emotional exhaustion. But evidence from letters, diaries, and contemporary medical notes strongly suggests that Wilde suffered from tertiary syphilis during his last years. Doctors of the time diagnosed him with conditions that modern medicine recognizes as classic markers of neurosyphilis: nerve pain, meningitis-like inflammation, cognitive slowing, and behavioral changes. Wilde's final months were marked by memory lapses and difficulty speaking, an agonizing decline for a man whose greatest weapon had always been his words. He died at 46, far younger than his talent deserved, and his final tragedy may have been a preventable illness that robbed him of the mind that once danced circles around Europe. 6. Edgar Allan Poe: The Raven's Shadowed Descent. Edgar Allan Poe's death has fueled speculation for more than 170 years. Alcoholism, poisoning, rabies, political kidnapping, even conspiracy theories. But beneath all the rumors, a simpler and medically consistent possibility has been raised by several scholars: syphilis. Poe's letters and medical records from his few hospitalizations reveal symptoms that go far beyond drunkenness. Severe headaches, intermittent paralysis, hallucinations, tremors, confusion, erratic emotional swings, and spells of delirium. His behavior fluctuated wildly, one week lucid and focused, the next incapacitated. Such cycles are a known pattern in neurosyphilis, particularly when the disease affects the meninges, causing episodes of inflammation followed by temporary recovery. Doctors who examined Poe shortly before his death noted neurological abnormalities inconsistent with alcohol withdrawal. His final collapse, shivering, delirious, slipping in and out of consciousness, matches descriptions of syphilitic meningoencephalitis recorded in the same era. We cannot prove it, but the medical context of the 1840s, combined with Poe's symptoms, paints a picture more coherent than the myths built around him. Perhaps the master of the macabre was not undone by vice or mystery, but by an infection silently destroying the organ he relied on most, his mind. Before penicillin became widely available in the 1940s, syphilis was a quiet apocalypse, an illness so common that millions carried it, yet so stigmatized that almost no one spoke of it. Many of the world's most brilliant minds, most charismatic stars, and most powerful figures lived in the shadow of a disease that medicine could not stop and society refused to acknowledge. Capone, Hughes, Barrymore, Muni, Wilde, Poe, different in every way, yet connected by a single invisible thread. Their downfalls were not just the stories of men undone by ego, addiction, scandal, or madness. They may have been victims of a bacteria that rewired their brains, distorted their thoughts, and erased their genius piece by piece. Penicillin arrived too late for them. But today, their stories remind us that the line between brilliance and tragedy is often drawn not by fate or flaw, but by the illnesses we overlook, misunderstand, or hide. And sometimes, the greatest mystery in a legend's life isn't what they did, but what was quietly happening inside them all along.